tu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavaditamastu ma binvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Welcome, everyone. I have a submitted question, two-part question today, which I'll read first. The story of Tirumular, Saint Sundaranadar, went into the bed body of the cowherd Mulan and became Tirumular. Mulan was not a scholar, but while using his body, Sundaranada composed the Tirumandaram. Mulan's brain is the hardware, Sundaranada's soul is the software. This shows that the knowledge acquired by the soul is not controlled, constrained by the body it resides in. Is this true for anyone? That is, do we carry our knowledge of the divine with us to our next birth and start from where we left off? So that's the first part of the question. Do we carry our knowledge of the divine with us to our next birth and start from where we left off? Second part of the question. Is this true for any of the knowledge other than of spiritual nature? For example, mathematics and art. Please elaborate on these during this Sunday's Golden Gate Mission Zoom satsang. So here we are, elaborating. So I'll start by answering the second part of the question about carrying specific knowledge forward, and just have some text to read for that. Yes, we do carry our knowledge of mathematics and art to the next birth and start where we left off. So I have two quotes from Gurudeva about that idea. First one's from Dancing with Shiva, Shloka 22. Through the ages, reincarnation has been the great consoling element within Hinduism, eliminating the fear of death, explaining why one person is born a genius and another an idiot. We are not the body in which we live, but the immortal soul which inhabits many bodies in its evolutionary journey through samsara. After death, we continue to exist in unseen worlds, enjoying or suffering the harvest of earthly deeds until it comes time for yet another physical birth. Because certain karmas can be resolved only in the physical world, we must enter another physical body to continue our evolution. After soaring into the causal plane, we enter a new womb. Subsequently, the old Manomaya kosha is slowly sloughed off and a new one created. The actions set in motion in previous lives form the tendencies and conditions of the next. Reincarnation ceases when karma is resolved, God is realized, and moksha attained. So that's the reference there. The actions set in motion in previous lives form the tendencies and conditions of the next. So that includes knowledge acquired. And that was also the idea in the first sentence, which Gurudeva doesn't really elaborate on as much as he could. Through the ages, reincarnation has been the great consoling element within Hinduism, eliminating the fear of death, explaining why one person is born a genius and another an idiot. So the person is born a genius because he's carrying forward from many past lives the tendencies. So that's why he's a genius. He's been working on this particular area of knowledge for many lives and is born a genius as a result. Next quote on this idea, merging with Shiva. The Hindu looks at time not in a 24-hour day, but a cycle of lifetimes. of many lives, and from creation of the soul to its eventual fulfillment of merger in Shiva. The Westerner looks at time as a straight line. It has a beginning, it has an end. The line begins at birth and ends at death. Therefore, such a short line of consciousness cannot waste time in superstition, imagination. Whereas the Hindu believes that the knowledge acquired in one life should be carried over to the next, and the next. It is an ever-building, ever-growing maturation of not only the soul, but the many bodies it inhabits. The theme that we are working with is the continuity of consciousness, from birth to death, but even more from the creation of the soul to its final merger into its creator. Having fully matured into the image and likeness of the creator and the experiential consciousness, 24 hours a day as creating karmas. Now we'll turn to the first part. And for that, I'll share the screen. There we go. Oh, we have a keynote called The Journey to Liberation. See if it's working right here. The rishis asked the gods, what must a person do if he wishes to reach the blissful state of union with God? Is there a state that not only confers upon a supreme unbroken bliss, but also puts an end to pain, sorrow, and suffering? Does this process of reincarnation go on forever? The gods explained, no, each time the soul takes on a new body, it gets closer and closer to becoming perfect. To gain a better birth each time, one must live according to the natural laws that Hinduism proclaims, and live out the karma in this life positively and fully, while at the same time refraining from creating painful new karmas. After a number of such excellent incarnations, and after God realization has been attained, the soul body becomes mature enough that it no longer needs to take a physical incarnation. Instead, it continues its evolution on inner planes of consciousness. This release from samsara is called moksha. The soul is said to be freed from the bondage of birth and death. With this dramatic passage, Gurudeva explained liberation from rebirth. To attain life's ultimate purpose, 3 qualifications must be met. Earthly karma must be resolved, dharma must have been well performed, and God must be realized. Well, this is an important definition of the requirements for moksha that I quote quite frequently. So I'll say a few words about it since it's so important. If I were to ask what is required for moksha, I'm sure all of you would say something like God realization, realizing the self. We need to do that to achieve moksha, which of course is the primary idea. If I then said something else is required for moksha, what would that be? I'm sure a number of you would come up with the idea, oh, we have to resolve all our karma. Otherwise, even though we realize God will, we come back because we have karma we can only resolve on the earth plane. Good. But then if I said there's one more thing, that would probably stump you. And that's the idea of dharma well performed, unless you have this one memorized. And that means we need to live through all the various dharmas. We need to do lots of different things to mature the soul. We're a man, we're a woman, laborer, doctor, scientist, teacher. We're all the different types of dharmas that we need to fulfill our life on earth. So that's the third element. We have to do different things. Okay, sorry. Touched something the wrong way here. The Upanishads assure us, if here one is able to realize him before the death of the body, he will be liberated from the bondage of the world. And I have my putting someone to sleep image. I have found a surefire way to put an audience to sleep within 5 minutes. It's guaranteed. I've done it a few times. You know, they actually don't fall asleep, but they'll totally lose interest. Start talking to one another, and you can tell you lost the group. Is to talk at length about moksha. Why is this? It is because moksha seems so far off, something to be concerned about in a future life, something that is for monks to think about. This is because everyone feels that the challenges they are facing in day-to-day living are a sufficient focus, and thus there is no need to also think about moksha. After all, there are 3 other more immediate goals: dharma, wealth, and love. Few seem to incorporate moksha into their philosophical framework. Most have only the vaguest concept of what existence after liberation would be like. Besides, why think about something that seems so far off, something to be concerned about in a future life? Knowing that release comes only when the soul is ripe for realization, having matured through many lives, the average devotee concludes that moksha is as remote as Jupiter, strictly the concern of yogis and sadhus. So that's what we're working with here. So it's a challenge. The challenge is to make life's ultimate spiritual attainment relevant to day-to-day family life. In public presentations, I refer to moksha as the X marks the spot destination, and then describe the journey that leads to it. While the destination may be distant, the journey toward it is already happening, whether we recognize it or not. I ask everyone to visualize a mountain with a winding path leading to the summit, which is blissful experience of God realization and moksha. In each life, we are born near the same point on the path we reached at the end of our last life. So that's the important point. We're not starting over. We don't jump ahead. You know, we're the same. We just keep going. Ideally, in each lifetime, we move farther up the path toward the mountaintop. So we're not trying to reach the top. We're just trying to move up the path as much as we're able to. Trying to move up the path, and what we're trying to avoid is we don't stand still, and what we really want to avoid is going backwards. There's no point to going backwards. And we'll explain what takes you backwards in a second. First, standing still results from living a materialistic, self-centered life. And we're not going backwards, but we're not going forwards. We're just acquiring things from ourselves. We're concerned about ourselves, enjoying life, being famous. That's our only concern. So there's no spiritual progress being achieved. Going backwards is the price we pay for adharmic deeds, such as serious violence and dishonesty. So that includes, things like fraud, major fraud. In the old days, I talked about the WorldCom fraud, and more recently we had the Sachem computer in Andhra Pradesh. That one works. Everyone realizes that was a pretty big case of fraud, and that would take him backwards quite a bit. Take him a long time just to get back to where he was at the beginning of this life. So going backwards, we don't want to do that. And that's easy to avoid. We just don't participate in major adharmic deeds, such as major violence or major dishonesty. This singular long-term goal defines the direction of Dharma and the well-lived life, and provides a North Star for all navigating the rough seas of earthly existence. Most souls have much to do and achieve before striving for moksha directly, though all hope to attain it ultimately. It is achieved only after a certain level of perfection has been attained. Maturity of the soul is sufficient to harness the forces of instinct, intellect, and emotion. Happily, Hinduism affirms that every person on earth will eventually reach the unitive state of moksha and be free from rebirth. So all religions don't have that kind of perspective that everybody is going to achieve the highest goal that religion offers. But in Hinduism, it's guaranteed. Everybody ends up achieving moksha. Eventually. It's going to obviously take someone who's a major criminal or a terrorist a lot longer than someone who's a saint. But eventually they'll reach it because everyone is on the spiritual path and will eventually achieve the final goal because it's built into their soul. Soul is programmed for that to happen. To describe how we can move toward moksha, I use the analogy of dance. I ask listeners, what is most needed for a youth to become good at Hindu classical dance? And of course, in a Hindu audience, everyone knows the answer and says, practice. Absolutely. Can't be a good dancer without practice. Reading books about dance won't make you a good dancer, nor will attending classes without practicing what you have learned. So you can't just go to the class and not practice. Regular practice is needed to keep the body limber and to master the art. Making strides on the spiritual journey to liberation is the same. To grow and evolve into our divine potential requires regular practice, ideally daily practice. Spiritual advancement we make is directly related to the time and effort we devote to religious practices. Sage Patanjali stresses this in his Yoga Sutra. Chapter 1, verse 21-22. For those who have strong dedication, samadhi is near. Whether one's practice is mild, medium, or intense also makes a difference. And then some wisdom from Gurudeva. Gurudeva taught, when the soul has had enough experience, it naturally seeks to be liberated, to unravel the bonds. That begins the most wonderful process in the world as the seeker steps for the first time on the spiritual path. Of course, the whole time, through all those births and lives and deaths, the soul was undergoing a spiritual evolution, but unconsciously. Now it seeks to know God consciously. That is the difference. It's a big difference. He stressed that seekers who are devout, who are sufficiently awakened to practice yoga, to seek the inner meaning of life, have arrived at this crucial stage. While liberation may be lifetimes away, this is indeed the time to cognize the goal and begin molding yourself for it by living in a way that brings advancement and unfoldment of your soul. But who has the time in a normal day for a generous period of spiritual practice? Many tell me they have no time at all. Employment, transportation, eating, entertainment, exercise, home duties, and spending time with family and friends take up the whole day, every day. As a solution to get started, I recommend shortening the period of sadhana, but doing it regularly. For youth, I suggest a 10-minute spiritual workout is a good way to begin. And ideally, that's around age 15 or 16. At that point, some youth is mature enough to sustain it. Otherwise, they'll start and stop. Oh, it consists of worship, introspection, affirmation, and study. So that's a good way to get started, and of course after one is stable in that, then it should be increased, such as up to half an hour, and then Gurudeva's ideal, for those who are really serious, is to put a full hour in your daily sadhana period. If you are following Dharma and performing regular daily sadhana, you can be assured you are moving forward in a significant way in this life on your journey to liberation. As moksha takes many lives to achieve, it is important that you remember to enjoy the journey. As Gurudeva loved to say, life is meant to be lived joyously. There is in much of the world the belief that life is a burden, a feeling of penitence, that it is good to suffer, good for the soul. In fact, the spiritual journey is not that way at all. Well, that's a very important point we're closing with there. I'll turn off the sharing. Okay, I'm back. Some individuals are very sincere about their spiritual disciplines, but they think that they need to be somber. Somber means you always look serious, you never have any fun. And that's not necessary. We want to be serious about our sadhana, which means we do it regularly, but we don't want to be somber about it, which means we never smile or laugh or have fun. So we're serious at the time of day we're doing our sadhana, but we should enjoy life. We should have fun, smile, be happy with friends, just like anyone else on the spiritual path or not on the spiritual path. That's a balanced life. Thank you very much.